Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank you. This is a budget. This is a budget brought down by the government that we are now debating, which is about winding Tasmania backwards. Today, I was very proud to sit and carefully listen to everything that was said by my leader, Will Hodgman, the Leader of the Opposition, for his address in reply to the Giddings' latest budget and the alternative budget that's been released today, which he's entitled The Roadmap to Recovery and Growth. It was an inspiring address. It gave a vision about hope for the future. It gave a vision that can give people of Tasmania hope for the future. Now, already it has begun. The Minister for Education and Skills, he can't help himself. He was listened to respectfully today, much more so than he gave the Leader of the Opposition, I might add, who he interjected on throughout his address. But we listened carefully to what both the Premier as Leader of the Labor Party had to say, and we listened very carefully today to what the Leader of the Greens, Mr McKim, had to say. Now, I want to divert just for one moment at this point and say today is very special in one respect. Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, today was very special in one respect, and that is that the very good news came for my electorate of Bass that TEMCO planned to restart one of their 4 furnaces at the beginning of July. As a member for Bass, that filled my heart with joy. Like everyone else, well, I think nearly everyone else, was very concerned about the future of that plant. It's got an important part both in our economic base in the north, indeed for our state, and it plays a very important role as a major employer in northern Tasmania. Great to hear. And I endorsed what the Minister had to say when he addressed this point, just speaking about TEMCO. And great also to know that it will be anticipated to be back in full production by the end of August. Now, we're never happy to hear about job cuts, and TEMCO have said, unfortunately, that job cuts will occur at the plant. They haven't put a figure on it, but they have said that it will occur through natural attrition. So my heart is glad today that that major employer in my electorate has a bright future. I commend management there at BHP Billiton TEMCO because the 300 directly employed people, that's 300 families, members, that's 300 families, and the additional 100 contractors who were relying on that plant. I still today give voice for the concerns of my community, not just Georgetown. People make a mistake when they think it's just Georgetown, but it's throughout the north that the employment actually occurs. For Bell Bay Aluminium, which has had a number of different names, including Comalco, for which it's best known, but the 560 direct employees and the some 400 contractors, together with the multiplier effect there, while that plant is still running as usual, naturally people are concerned on the basis of the London Metal Exchange prices and the Australian dollar, which fortunately has improved in respect of that export business. Madam Deputy Speaker, turning back to the budget today, the Liberal vision outlined by Will Hodgman today is for a Tasmania that's more self-reliant. And we want it to be more open for business, a place where Tasmanians can feel proud that they'll have a good start here and a future that they can plan for to be part of the Tasmanian fabric. We do need to create the wealth to fund the essential services such as health, education and public safety. Now, it's been a recurring theme from us in the opposition throughout this year to make it clear that we need to support all industries in our state. And we've made it a part of our narrative to point out that Tasmania's economy does have 5 essential pillars. They are resources, agriculture and fisheries, energy, education and technology, and of course tourism. And while the Minister for Education and Skills, who is a jobs destroyer, wants to continue to interject on what was a message of hope for the future under a future Liberal majority Hodgman government, we're actually quite determined to stare down those forces that are in the Tasmanian community, including this fella over here, who just wants to take away and to destroy what others have created. And that's quite an appalling thing, because today, as it is, the minister who interjects is the Minister for Education and Skills.
That's right.
This is a minister who's now currently presiding over an education system which is getting less support from the taxpayer. It's some $58 million less than last year. He's currently proceeding with $190 million in cuts.
Mr. McKim, on a point of order.
Thank you. I'll just wait till the member resumes his seat. I'll just wait till the member resumes his seat so I can take the point
Mr.
of
McKim,
order.
on a point of order. Resume his seat, please.
He will get there.
Mr. McKim,
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just draw your
ask the member
attention.
to resume his seat, please.
Madam Speaker, the point of order is that the education budget is actually bigger than it was last year, not smaller. And I just think it's important that the
Madam
member be
Deputy, on a
accurate
point
when
of
he's
order,
addressing
that's
the
clearly
House.
outside the standing orders. That's disgraceful. That's a disgraceful, time-wasting tactic from a minister who's been caught out. Because while he interjects on a contribution about building our economy so that we can fund the essential service of government, including in his portfolio of education and skills, which, as I was saying, he is currently presiding. He is currently presiding over budget cuts to the measure of $190 million. Madam Deputy Speaker, on a point of order, may I ask you please to draw the minister to order? This is quite unruly and unreasonable for the minister to behave this way. I'll continue. It's my contribution and I will be heard, and I will exercise my right without being rudely interjected by the minister who's cutting education and skills budgets to the tune of $190 million.
It's a bigger
and
budget than it was last year.
Illustrates the point that while the Labor Greens Party want to continue to wind down our economy, that is going to have a major impact on the services that we can afford to fund. And it's true, this is a Labor Green budget. Why is that? It's because it's been overspending, it's deficit and it's debt. That is a classic Labor budget. And why is it that it's necessary for the Liberals to have the response that we've had? Well, it includes these factors. First of all, that unemployment rates are at the nation's worst. And in Tasmania, that is currently 7.7% on trend. And that compares very poorly to the national figure of 4.9%, which is a declining figure. We now have nearly 20,000 Tasmanians out of work. And that should concern every member, because they are families. And we've seen 4,100 jobs lost since the last election some 2 years ago. And I draw the House's attention to the fact that it was a former Premier, Labor Premier, who ran to the last election promising, in fact, to create an extra 15,000 jobs. And he's just made a mockery in the Labor Party today. He makes a mockery of those past wild promises. But you can't create jobs while you're winding back industries. And my electorate of Bass is today feeling the pain of an unstable government that's much more interested in self-interest than its people that it should be fighting for, working for and representing. It's not just the job-destroying policies that the government is embarking on, such as killing off the forest industry, but it's also the nature of the government itself. And why is it that we need recovery, and why is it that we need growth? On the first point, the government ought to acknowledge that it's taken Tasmanians down a very sad and pathetic path. Our state is in economic recession and social decline. Today there are less Tasmanians in work. Today Labor and the Greens are killing the spirit of this state. Today they are destroying self-belief. Families are leaving our state to find opportunities elsewhere because whereas once you might have thought it's good for a person to have a choice. They want to leave Tasmania and find opportunities elsewhere, that's fine. But when it's not based on a choice but necessity, that's just wrong. It's quite wrong. And we see now that we've got the government and its members are more interested in staying in government than encouraging our young Tasmanians to stay in Tasmania and to find their future here. And of course the government's been spending yesterday's savings. It's been living beyond its means. But it gets worse. You haven't been listening anyway, but it gets worse. It's been spending tomorrow's income as well. And that means our young people, who are our next generation of taxpayers, will be paying the price for this gross and reckless spending and budget decisions made in recent years. But it gets worse again, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this government has been spending yesterday's savings, which were being put away for tomorrow's liabilities, unfunded liabilities, and specifically This government has been spending public servant superannuation. If it was in the private sector, they'd be in jail, because you can't do that. It's against the law. But the government have now dispensed with the superannuation provision account. It's actually gone. There is no such account anymore. It's just been rolled into debt. And, of course, it's the self-same government that's overspent the past 6 Tasmanian budgets by $1 billion. And when we've heard this Premier and previous Premier talking about getting the hay out of the barn, that's a euphemism for spending the savings that the state had, specifically, as we now know, the superannuation savings, which were gradually being built up because we knew that unfunded liabilities were going to occur in the future, and they needed to be provided for. The Liberals' alternative to this budget has 4 main thrusts. The first is to grow the economy and create jobs. We want to support our forestry industry. We will tear up the IGA because it's a disastrous deal for our state. It's a terrible deal. And whoever negotiated that from the Tasmanian side got an appalling deal, even if you saw value in destroying jobs. It's a bad deal. And anyone that says it's a good deal and it's the future for our state, or that it's some sort of transition strategy for our state, they are deluded and they're getting a bad deal for our state. It needs to be ripped up. We also support our economy by supporting the agriculture sector. And my colleague, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, has done a fine job of outlining our future vision for agriculture and including in our alternative budget the provision of $4.95 million to get started with that vision to grow the industry. It's a great industry, it's a worthwhile industry, and it's one that we should encourage. It's not just the dirt under the fingernails that occasionally it's proclaimed as or shown to be, but it's a great career path for young people to consider, including in the professional career paths. We need to feed and we need to clothe ourselves, and in doing so we create opportunities for export, both interstate and overseas. In education, we see that as an important contributor to growing our economy. And why shouldn't we? It's also about creating a job-ready generation. We can do better to improve our education system's performance by genuinely working with teachers and principals, by empowering, supporting and developing them. Genuinely working with local communities to improve and empower local schools, which stands in dramatic contrast to the performance of this minister.
We're already doing it.
Who in fact wanted to shut down local schools against their wishes, forcibly, with no genuine consultation, none at all. Madam Deputy Speaker, the minister says that he saved those 20 schools. He wants to get in the car and go and find out what they have to say about that, because he did quite the contrary. The presence of those schools.
Mr Ferguson has the call.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. The presence of those schools in those 20 communities that were menaced by this minister is an important economic centre for those communities, not only from the work that it actually performs under its own roof, but as well as that, because it's actually showing confidence in a region.
It was a Labor plot.
To have forcibly shut those schools would have been to kill and to rip the heart out of those local communities and to sap the economic vigour that they would have had to encourage people to come to that area and to study. Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, part of our plan is to extend high schools to Year 12, to deal with the structural separation between grades 10 and senior secondary years.
Mr Groom, you can take a conversation outside if you want to continue it.
Thanks, Madam Deputy
Mr Ferguson
Speaker.
has the call.
And we do need to see more young people developed into their potential in life, and that is what our policy is all about. We do need to fix, very importantly, the final element of dysfunction that was created by the Labor Party and in its so-called Tasmania Tomorrow education experiment. The Labor Party busted TAFE. I can't blame Minister McKim for that. It's the Labor Party that busted TAFE, and it was a terrible decision. It was the wrong decision.
Your party supported
it. was the wrong decision.
Your party supported
and it's been an appalling...
Only the Greens
it was
opposed
rushed
it.
out the door. And the minister now who wants to brag that he tried to stop it, he's wasted 2 years. That was precious time that he could have implemented Greens,
Mr. Ferguson.
former Greens policy to restore TAFE.
Still is our
But he wasted those 2 years under the duress of the Labor Party and keeping in happy with his self-interest policy, which overruled his policy on TAFE. What a shame, because now we wonder what capacity a future TAFE will have.
To listen to fingers
Madam Deputy Speaker, we'll hand back the carbon tax to Tasmanians. They shouldn't have to pay it. It's not even a climate policy. It's just a tax. It's not going to change the temperature of the globe. Australia is moving on its own. It's got a carbon price much higher than in Europe, and it's just a tax. It's just a revenue raiser. But Tasmanians who should be proud that their energy system is almost entirely renewable, why should they be paying carbon tax, Madam Deputy Speaker? So handing back that carbon tax will generate an extra $157 million of economic activity over 4 years in our state. And it will make our state the most competitive place to do business. And why should householders and small businesses have to pay that unfair carbon tax on their electricity bills? And so we stand proudly with the battlers, the householders and the small business people trying to eke out an honest living and raise their families, while the Greens Party gloat that they've achieved a policy goal of a carbon tax in Canberra. And why should it be paid by Tasmanians? It shouldn't be. And that's just a part, and I commend my colleague Mr Groom, who's been the driving force for our policy agenda in energy, whose knowledge is exceeded by no one else in this place on energy. No one else here knows what this man knows about energy. No one else. And our other policies include full retail contestability for energy, and that's the choice that Tasmanians deserve. They deserve to be able to choose their energy provider, and with competition, of course, it stands to reason that Tasmanians can benefit from that. We've had this as a long-held position. The Labor Party more recently have come to it as well. So there's some element of agreement, but of course the Greens want to hold that up completely. Madam Deputy Speaker, could you pull that former minister into line? Quite appalling behaviour. Oh, quite appalling, quite appalling.
Mr Ferguson has the call.
Lala, it's a funny expression from you, Mr Sturgis. Madam Deputy Speaker, we believe in tourism and its potential for our state, and we want to provide an additional $16 million for tourism marketing over the next 4 years, and that's a tactic to achieve our goal of reaching 1.5 million visitors annually by 2020, which we're assured by the industry will generate an extra 8,000 jobs and $1 billion worth of economic activity. Madam Deputy Speaker, we'll refocus the state service into growing the economy through a new Department of State Growth and an Office of the Coordinator General. Now, this has been already misrepresented by the Labor Party. It's about growth. It's about making the public service fit for purpose, and the purpose is growing our economy. The point's already been made. If you want the jobs and the services in health and education and public safety, we've got to grow the economy. Who do you think pays the taxes to keep this country and our state running? It's a growing economy, it's business and it's consumers who are paying taxes. If you want to increase the tax base, we need to increase the economy. The Coordinator General will troubleshoot projects. She will get things happening. That role is critical to ending the no mentality which causes so many people to complain that you can't get things done in Tasmania. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am very proud of our position on health because we need to deliver the essentials. We need to cut the fluff and we need to deliver the essentials. And in our alternative budget, we are showing through more targeted and better savings across government that we can find $76 million for our health system. This is to allow our health system to lift the performance in terms of reaching elective surgery for needy Tasmanians, because they're missing out right at this moment. They are seriously missing out, and the people who are languishing on waiting lists, I think, unfortunately, a poorly named waiting list being elective surgery makes it sound like you don't really need it. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are people in pain, they are in need, and just because it's not urgent at this moment they unfortunately have to continue to wait. So we are about restoring elective surgery funding, and it's an investment in our state. It's an investment in our people, and many of these people are suffering. They are looking to us. Who will listen to us, they say, and the answer from the Liberal opposition is we are listening and we will deliver. The LGH, it's the heart of our community in Launceston. We're very proud of our hospital. We believe it's a very efficient one. We're very proud of the services that it offers. And the people of Launceston and northern Tasmania are going to greatly benefit from this policy being implemented. Madam Deputy Speaker, turning to the education portfolio again, who could forget the Labor Green government's attempt to shut down 20 schools last year? It was an appalling 18 days. It was a dreadful, dreadful lack of integrity from this government and the minister who continues to interject, I say unwisely, because he brought in and he created a new issue which didn't exist before. He ruined the trust that existed between school communities and their government, and any future discussions on school closures or amalgamations or even the formation of federations, the trust has been completely blown. For whatever worthwhile initiatives and good people in the department who will now be given the job of going out into communities and working with them and encouraging them to consider future options, I say the trust has been severely damaged by this minister's 18 days of mayhem in 2011. It was a disgraceful performance. And while I welcome the fact that the government appears for now to have dropped its forcible school closures policy, we know that this parliament is now halfway through its term. The coming election will signal a date after which the government will proceed immediately again to forcibly shutting down Tasmanian schools. We in the Liberal Party believe that the backdown by the minister,
So you're not going to win government?
we believe the backdown had last year was a victory for local communities, and we celebrate with them for the achievement that they got. We have stood and we will continue. We will continue to stand with Tasmanian schools because of the appalling way that they were treated. We assure them of our commitment that we will never proceed with forcible school closures, and they have the safety and security of a future Liberal government which really cares about them and would not move to forcible school closures. From Bracknell to Dover, from Stanley to Ringarooma, the minister destroyed trust, is singularly responsible for declining enrolments in a number of them, up to 30% over the summertime, and he's severely damaged their future prospects as it is. So we'll regard with suspicion anything this minister tries to do in future as regards school viability. We'll take nothing that he says at face value and will scrutinise him to the nth degree to make sure that any legislation he brings into this parliament is scrutinised, and it will not pass with our support unless it meets with our criteria, which is that we don't support the forcible closures of Tasmanian schools, and that should not be the big stick that the minister or his delegates seek to use in influencing schools to close voluntarily or amalgamate. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are absolutely committed to improving our education system in government. A majority Hodgman Liberal government is committed to extending Tasmanian high schools to Year 12. We hear the mockery of the Labor and Greens Party. We hear it. We hear it. And I tell you what, Madam Deputy Speaker, Tasmanian families are hearing it too. The choice is becoming more and more stark between a government that is determined to keep Tasmanians poor and as poorly educated as they can, in contrast to the Liberal Party, which believes in choice for the young person and their family, and we believe in lifting them and challenging them to meet their potential in life. This government is committed to a mediocre system. I say up front, we've got fine teachers, fine principals and fine colleges and schools in our state working the best they can in the system in which they find themselves. But they do not have the support and the encouragement and the nurture of a minister who A, can be trusted, or B, is concerned for the future, because this is a government about self-interest. It's not a government about the future. The Hodgman Liberal alternative is about hope. It's about aspiration and reaching our potential. The minister this morning seemed oblivious to the fact that it's actually 58% of our young people that are finishing Year 12 or getting a trade equivalent. Isn't that right, Mr Groom? The Minister was unaware of that because he disputed it. That figure is in the skills report card released earlier this year.
Are you
The
talking
Minister
about
didn't
apparent
even
retention
know.
rates?
Oh, now you redefine the argument, but the Minister didn't know. He said the figure was 70%.
I'm talking
Well, of
about
course.
apparent retention rates,
Oh,
Mr.
you
Ferguson.
see, he doesn't understand. And it makes the point. The Minister has confused
I give
retention
up.
with achievement.
I give up on you.
That's an unforgivable
I really do.
mistake for you to make, Minister,
Oh,
because it shows that you don't know the difference between bums on seats and achievement. And I think that that tells the story for why this Minister is unfit to be Minister and why he's so ill-equipped
We'll move the motion
to
with
actually
no
make the
confidence in me
decisions
and bring it on
that
if
will
you've
set
got
up
the
our
balls.
system for the future.
personally
Because the
don't
truth
get
of the
it.
matter is that too few of our Tasmanian students who are born just as smart as anyone else in other states and countries are making it through our system and getting a Year 12 qualification or an equivalent trade qualification. It's just 58% on the skills report card that the Minister himself launched just a couple of months ago. Even more disturbing is that only 34% of students attain the TCE within the expected 2-year time frame of having completed Year 12, and that's taken from TQA annual report from last year. The Minister seems not to know or care about this, but the figures ought to confront us. That while we have excellent people, excellent courses and excellent institutions in our high schools and colleges, it's the system itself which can be improved. And we need to remove the separation that continues to exist between high school and senior secondary colleges, because it's that structural separation which continues to send a message to the Tasmanian community that school finishes at grade 10. And that is the problem that the Minister ought to confront, because he's stuck in the past. He is stuck in the past with a paradigm that may have worked once, but it does not fit our future. And if Tasmania is to meet the commitment that this government has made to get our Year 12 achievement rates up to 90% by 2015, we've got a long way to go. I wonder if the Minister is even aware that the current targets are to improve on our 58% figure by just 5% per year. We're never going to get to 90%, not by 2015, not by 2020. We've got to do better. And the Liberals strongly believe that a trades pathway is just as legitimate a pathway as an academic one, so long as the qualification pathway is locked in. And we'll support that.
The honourable member for Bass. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Speaker. Time is very short, so I'll cut to the chase and to continue yesterday's contribution in the moments I have left to show that we are serious in the Liberal Party about our plans in education. We've already budgeted in our alternative budget for a $40 million education investment fund. That's to begin the implementation process, and it's also an acknowledgement that some schools may well require new infrastructure, and we want to support that. The fundamental values that underpin this much-needed policy for our state is the strong belief that the structure of our education system ought to be made to fit in with the needs of the Tasmanian community and not the other way around. Finally, Mr. Speaker, there are other initiatives that we are dedicated to, including once and for all fixing the mess and damage that's been caused to our skills sector by ending the final plank of the Tasmania Tomorrow education experiment and restoring and rebuilding a modern TAFE that is actually focused on meeting the workforce needs of Tasmanian industry. Also, Mr. Speaker, we are passionate, I certainly am, about reinstating the Tasmanian Trainee and Apprentice Incentive Scheme. This is a fantastic scheme that's been stopped and started by the Labor government, but we need to bring it back, because we know that by restoring that scheme we'll create new apprenticeships, we'll retain existing ones and secure excellent training outcomes for the Tasmanian community. Our economy needs it. I commend the alternative budget to the House.
The Honourable Minister Community